following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and we are all about hot stove season. George Case, would you please introduce the wonderful panel for today?
Yeah, I sure would, Ralph. It's going to be an interesting session we're going to have. Our panelist today, David Hubler, who's with us every Sunday. David, author of The Nats and the Grays, a wonderful book about World War II era baseball.
Hi, good morning.
Alan Blumkin, our resident baseball historian, maven in New York, and Alan, a great Pittsburgh Pirates fan. And Alan has a tremendous knowledge of baseball and baseball history, and we always appreciate his comments every week.
Thank you, George. Hello there, everybody.
Hey, my pleasure. Also Ronnie Rabinovitz, and Ronnie just was letting us know that it's warmed up a little bit in Minneapolis. It's not 50 below zero anymore, so welcome, Ronnie. We're sort of due in for a spring training kind of weather now. Here in the East, they're talking about maybe 60 degrees in the next day or two. So,
wonderful.
I think our session today, probably we're going to be talking about a couple of things. One is spring training, because pitchers and catchers, report in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now. And also the other day, and I have something I wanted to mention to Ronnie, but it was Jackie Robinson's 100th birthday. So
yes,
I thought today we could talk a little bit about Jackie. We talk a little bit about spring training. And, Ronnie, I'm going to turn it over to you because you're the one with the tremendous knowledge and background with Jackie Robinson. So if you would, just give us a little insight into your relationship with Jackie Robinson.
Okay, thanks, George. As you mentioned, January 31st was Jackie's 100th birthday, and Major League Baseball is going to honor him throughout the whole year. It's usually just April 15th, but they're going to honor him for the whole year. UCLA is having a program for him, a jazz concert. Dodger Stadium, of course, will have something on April 15th, and there'll be other things going on. There'll be a traveling exhibit coming throughout the country, and then the big thing will be next December. In December, they will be opening the Jackie Robinson Museum in New York, which should be very, very thrilling.
Wow.
As everybody knows, he was the first African-American to play Major League Baseball. He was the one that opened the door for everybody, both African-Americans and Latinos, and in the business world, and even an African-American president. It's an honor to have known him. Rachel is going strong. She's 96 years old, God bless her. And her daughter Sharon, who I'm dear friends with, is doing well too. So, and their son David. So it should be an
Ronnie,
exciting
I wanted to
year.
ask you. You mentioned the museum in New York. Where is that going to be, and what's the plans? I was not aware of that. I'm really happy to hear it, but I was not aware of
Yes.
that. Is it going to be in Brooklyn?
It's going to be in New York. It's going to be right near on Varick Street.
Lower Manhattan.
Lower Manhattan, yeah. Yep.
That's an interesting place for it. You would have thought they would have put it right by the stadium in Brooklyn, where the Cyclones play on.
Well, that Varick Street is part of the
Holy Island.
So
forget it. There's no place no adequate place that they could put something like that in Coney Island. Well, the Jackie Robinson Foundation offices are on the second floor of the same building, so it kind of
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You have to travel pretty far to get down to Coney Island, and Manhattan that has a lot of foot traffic. Is probably the best place for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it should be very, very exciting.
You mentioned, Ronnie, you mentioned UCLA. There was a piece on the Sportscast last night showing Jackie in 4 different uniforms at UCLA because he played 4 sports there.
He played 4 sports.
Yeah, and he was outstanding in all 4.
Yeah.
The sportscaster said that baseball was his weakest sport.
Right. And look what he did in baseball.
Yeah.
He was a natural athlete. I mean, he was an excellent golfer. He played tennis. He played ping pong. He was an All-American in football, All-American in basketball. He broke the world's record in the broad jump and track, and he played baseball. He's the only athlete ever at UCLA to letter in 4 sports to this day.
So back in those days, basketball and football didn't pay anything.
Yeah,
really,
yeah. And they didn't have
that he was not a good Parcheesi player.
Yeah.
Ron, I put down a couple of sites on Facebook. I think 3 sites. One, the Sweet 16, which covers baseball until 1960, and 2 Brooklyn Dodgers sites that he and Babe Ruth were the 2 most important baseball players of the 20th century.
That's right.
No doubt.
Well, they say
I put that down for a couple of years now.
They said Babe Ruth changed baseball. Jackie Robinson changed America.
Yeah.
And he did it alone.
And what did Martin Luther King say about the father of the civil rights movement?
Well, I was interviewed a few years ago by Larry King in L.A., and he was saying that the first time he interviewed Martin Luther King, he introduced him as the founder of the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King stopped him and said, "Larry, I have to correct you. I'm not the founder. Jackie Robinson was." Pretty impressive.
And the African American baseball players are now or recently retired know a hell of a lot more about him than say Vince Coleman, who was quoted 30 years ago saying, "I don't know no Jackie Robinson."
Yeah, you know what, Alan, I'd heard those kind of stories, and to me that was just amazing. I've heard that not only about Jackie Robinson, but about other ball players. I heard somebody was interviewed one time about Lou Gehrig. I don't know anything about Lou Gehrig.
That's Don Mattingly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me...
But Jackie, but the thing is that Don Mattingly still could have played baseball. If it wasn't for Jackie Robinson, Vince Coleman could have not played Major League Baseball.
Right, exactly.
Yep. Ronnie, I have an interesting little story to tell you about Jackie Robinson, and this just happened the other day. I had my wife down in Philadelphia, had a doctor's appointment, and so a friend of mine who was my next door neighbor had a consultation with my wife, and so when he was through, he came out and he said, "George, I want you to meet somebody." So he brings another doctor, a colleague of his, out to talk to me, and the first thing the doctor says, "Oh, George Case, I certainly know your dad. By the way, do you know what today is?" And I said, "Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact." He said, "Yeah, it's Jackie Robinson's birthday." So I said, I thought to myself, I said to my wife on the way home, I said, "Boy, I've got to tell Ronnie when I talk to him on Sunday about that."
Yeah, it was also Arnie Banks' birthday.
And I thought they were going to talk to me about my wife's conditions and all that kind of stuff, and all they wanted to do was talk about baseball and Jackie Robinson.
That's great. It was also Arnie Banks' birthday. It would have been his 88th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
he's in some good company.
A wonderful story, and I love telling it and sharing it with adults and kids all over the country.
Nice, Ronnie. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
David Hubler, talk about the man who was the last to wear number 42 and who was elected unanimously into the Hall of Fame. I think there's a great irony there between Jackie and Mo.
Yeah, well, I'm particularly proud of Mo simply because he wore the pinstripes. but also because I have an affinity for Panama, having lived there. And at the time, he was probably just maybe 2 years old or so. Even if he might not have even been born yet, but he grew up in Panama, as so many other ball players do, really poor, and he's still a very religious man. I have his autobiography here signed, and he when he started pitching, he was planning to be a starting pitcher, and he actually failed at that. Fortunately for the Yankees, they decided to make him a reliever, and of course from a reliever he became a closer. He's probably, I haven't been back there in a while, but I'm convinced that he's a national hero there. There have been several athletes who have come forward from Panama who have become national icons in that small country, as you would expect. Rod Carew, yeah. And a number, Ismael Laguna, a boxer, and of course Mano de Piedras was a great Panamanian boxer too. But I think one of the great characteristics about Mo, and I think this has to do with his religious upbringing, is that he's a very self-effacing person. He's not a showman. I mean, if you watched him when he would strike out the last batter of the game or have him pop up to the infield, he didn't jump up and and give a fist bump or anything like that. He just went out, shook his catcher's hands, and off they went. Really a tremendous guy, and I think it's a great honor, of course, for him to be the first unanimously chosen Hall of Famer. It probably opens the gates for the same thing with Derek Jeter next year. So, and understand Mo was up there the other day looking over the landscape to see, where his plaque is going to be.
I saw a picture of that.
He was
They invite them up for just to start preparing them for their induction ceremony.
That's a tremendous honor for Mo, and I saw on I guess it was Facebook a couple of weeks ago, they had a clip of his last appearance in Yankee Stadium when Jeter and Girardi came out.
Pettit, and it was Andy Pettit. Yeah.
Or Andy Pettit, rather. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
All right.
I mean, it was really touching. The two of them walk out together and embrace Mo on the mound and that kind of thing. I mean, it was really a tremendous honor and a way to say goodbye. And the fact is, what David was just saying about the way he handled himself, always just did his job. He was the closer, did his job just like Mickey Mantle. Hey, Mantle hit a home run around the bases with his head down. I mean, he was not trying to show up anybody. And, Rivera was that same kind of person. So, David, I think your comments are right on. And, I know I'm personally thrilled to see him going in because I think if anybody's going to be a unanimous pick for the, first ballot Hall of Fame, it should have been Mariano Rivera.
I just hope it doesn't become a habit from now on. I mean, it was such a breaking that barrier was such a hard thing to do. I mean, when you think of all the great ball players who did not get in unanimously, right. And I just hope it doesn't, take away from that great honor for it to become, floodgates open, and now suddenly, Mo got in unanimously. It's no longer a barrier, so we can do the same thing later on.
Yeah, it was a great honor, and wasn't it that one sports writer who initially said he wasn't going to vote, and then
he was up in Massachusetts. Right. We don't count those guys up in Massachusetts. They all root for the Red Sox. How much would they know about baseball?
Guys, I think that one of the things that led to a unanimous vote is that in the older days when they put in Williams and Musial and Mays and Mantle and whoever, Henry Aaron, that the ballots were not revealed.
Yeah, they were secret ballots.
With everything now, that if one or two voted against Mariano, they would be publicized. And
there was a lot of racism involved in that too.
Yeah, and the one that comes to mind immediately is that they did expose the writer, and Ronnie, you would know this, the guy in Minnesota who voted for Cesar Tovar as the MVP in the American League in 1967, costing Carl Yastrzemski a unanimity there. And this guy was exposed, and he was pretty ridiculed. Yeah. It was Max Nichols, I think.
Yeah. And there was a fellow up in Massachusetts who publicly said he wasn't going to do it, and I think there was so much outrage that he changed his mind.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because it's public. It's become public.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You can't hide behind your ballot anymore.
No.
And he's the last player to wear number 42.
Yep.
Great honor too.
Ironic, isn't it?
And they asked him about that, and he during the interview after he was notified, and he said he was extremely proud to wear, be the last one to wear the number at Jackie Robinson.
Right. He's a first-class guy.
Yeah.
Let me pursue something. Baseball has become an international sport, as we all know, and Panama, which produced Rod Carew, a Hall of Famer, happens to be the place that David Hubler lived in for how many years were you in Panama?
A little over 3.
Okay.
But I never made the majors.
What was your timing, David? What years were you down there?
Wrong time. What?
What years were you down there?
Because the Jewish color line hadn't come into it.
Yeah, I was there from 72 through 76.
Oh.
Okay. What was the baseball program in Panama? Do they have leagues? Do they have?
Oh yeah, they have a lot of leagues. In fact, I tell you, I did an article for Islands magazine, which became an award-winning, one of the best of the decade articles. It was called "The Sun Shines on Dominican Diamonds." It was about baseball in the Dominican Republic. I was sent down there by the magazine during the season, during their winter season, and it's such a wonderful experience because you can go across the Dominican Republic in a day, and you can catch games all over the place. It was even more when I was down there. I forget, it was late 80s. There was even more hysteria, if you will, about baseball in the Dominican Republic. The Toronto Blue Jays had opened up one of the first academies down there, and kids were coming from all over the place. Some of them actually had, they used to play with cardboard gloves. They were so poor. They had no equipment. They had nothing. But there was a place I remember. It was a bar restaurant in the capital, Santo Domingo, that had a bank of cameras, and they were televising all of the games in the Winter League. The Azucareros del Este was one of the teams, and they had a whole bunch of teams that were competing in the Dominican League. And I was there with a photographer and a guide from the Dominican Baseball League. And the next day we were scheduled to go out to one of the stadiums. I forget which one it was at the moment. But anyway, we wanted them to know that we were coming. And the guide had said to us, well, we'll just announce it on TV, which he did, telling the stadium and the fans and the people that we'd be out there the next day. And sure enough, there was a group waiting for us who'd been watching that game on TV and came out. So it's much more. It was much more intense in the Dominican Republic than even in Panama. It was like night and day. The Panamanians are big baseball fans. They're also big soccer fans. And so, but in the Dominican, boy, it's baseball or nothing, Very interesting contrast.
Yeah, I think the Dominican Republic has probably produced a lot more Major League ball players than Panama.
Oh, sure, it has, definitely.
Because I think
especially
you're right,
shortstops.
I'm curious though. Do those Latin American countries, do they play one another? I mean, I know that they
have a Caribbean series.
Games, I think.
Yeah, there's a Caribbean series.
It just had to be moved.
There are a lot of Americans
Venezuela because of the chaos there. They moved it to Panama from Venezuela.
Yeah,
because Venezuela is not particularly, because of the total chaos that's down there.
Yeah, it's not particularly safe.
There's chaos in Venezuela lately as well. So
that's what he said.
Out of Venezuela because of the situation there.
Yeah, they moved it to Panama.
Out of Venezuela. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You
see a lot of American ball players are playing in the Winter League down there in the Dominican. Bill Monbouquet, I remember from the Red Sox, he was down there coaching, and there's a whole bunch of Americans that go down there, players and coaches and managers spending time down there in the Dominican. There's some wonderful resorts down there, so it's just a great place. They have much fancier resort areas than even Panama did at the time.
Yeah, the first Panamanian to make the majors was a pitcher named Humberto Robinson, who came up with the Braves in 1955, just a very few days before Hector Lopez came up with the Kansas City A's. And Hector Lopez hung around for a dozen years. So he was the first Panamanian player that really, developed a stronghold in the majors.
Hector, what a pair of hands.
Hands Lopez, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they nicknamed him.
That's right.
He wasn't that bad a defensive player. He just made a couple of gaffes.
Oh, when he played third base, which is where he played when he came up. Originally, he was not exactly a Golden Glove there, and that's where he developed his reputation. He was better when he went to the outfield.
Yes, indeed. And as a matter of fact, on that 61 Yankee team, which I consider to be the greatest team of my youth, that was incredibly deep. 4 catches hit over 20 home runs that year for the Yankees. They weren't all catchers when they hit the home runs, but Blanchard, Howard, Berra, maybe it was 3 catches.
3 catches, yeah.
All right, that's not too bad. Hey, I want to ask Ronnie, we're talking about Latin American baseball, and what with Jackie being honored and what have you, I think there's a horrible thing going on in baseball where there are fewer African American players playing in the major leagues today than there were in the 50s. Now,
yes.
What is it that has turned the African American community, the young players, away from careers in baseball? Ronnie?
Well, I have to report that this past year, there was 8.3% African Americans playing baseball, which was more than there had been in about 10 years. And they're working very hard. RBI, which is the Restoring Baseball in the Inner Cities, and other type of programs that Major League Baseball has to entice African Americans to play baseball. They did fall off. It was more basketball and things like that, but it's starting to increase again. So that was a good thing. I read about that this year, and I was very excited to hear that.
Well, you could take a poll. One of the things I was asked in an interview recently about, why did the Homestead Grays come to play so many games in Washington? And part of the reason was because of the affluent African American community there.
Right.
But if you go, and it's getting a little better, but I've been going to Nats games now since they moved down from Montreal. And the number of African Americans in the stands has been absolutely minimal.
Really?
The last couple of years, yeah. I mean, it was almost like there were none in the stands. Even where I would sit in, the fairly inexpensive seats, There was none. It's sad to look around. Now I don't know how it is with the Wizards, or the hockey club, but I thought it was very sad, indicative of the lack of interest in baseball among the African American community.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. I mean, if the parents have no interest in the game, our parents, for the most part, were baseball fans.
Right.
That's
right.
Today it's basketball and football fans. So the kids don't play baseball as much, sadly.
But
as I mentioned,
it is increasing, though.
Yes, it is.
8.3% was more than in the past 10 years. So,
like we just last year, right at our community park down the street, they inaugurated the Pudge Rodriguez Little League field, which is a beautiful field now, with an electric scoreboard and a big new flagpole and lights and a manicured infield. It's just looked beautiful.
Yeah. Nice. The Twins have done that too with a few baseball fields in the African American community. It's been very nice, and they're beautiful parks.
I wonder what they're doing. It would be interesting to find out. The new Yankee Stadium is just across the street from the old Yankee Stadium, but the old field is still there. The stands are gone, but the field is there, and I understand they use it for high school games and things like that. And they could take a page out of history and have these kids understand that they're playing where some of the greats of baseball played. That's the field. The stands are gone, but the field is there.
Right.
And get more kids interested in the game. There's a large African American and Latino population in that part of the Bronx. I hope they're doing something. Yeah,
I'm part of the RBI program here in Minnesota with the Twins, and it's really a good program. It's been excellent.
Ronnie, I want to ask you a question because I know you know this, and we should point this out. The Jackie Robinson project at George Washington University.
Yes.
What's happening with that?
I'm very disturbed by that whole thing.
Yeah.
It's been a wonderful program. Professor Richard Zamoff is the head of the whole program, and they have a Jackie Robinson a program there, and he actually teaches a semester course about Jackie Robinson. And the students are president, vice president. They have elections for these students, and it's a tremendous program. It's an outreach program also, where they go to other schools and talk about Jackie. And somehow or another, somebody on the executive board at George Washington has decided that to eliminate the Jackie Robinson project at GW. I've been writing letters. Of course, Richard Zamoff has written letters, and so far the dean, the president of the GW, has not wanted to get involved. And hopefully he will eventually, because it would be a very sad thing if that project went away.
Yeah, and one of the other things that they did each year, because I would go to the ceremonies and the meeting just about April 15th of every year. One of the things they did was they awarded one of the members of the baseball team a Jackie Robinson Award, who emulated the best of the sport.
Absolutely,
as Jackie did. So it was a wonderful honor because the parents would come in. The parents came in from everywhere when their kid, of course, was given this honor.
Exactly.
It was terrific. So
I always came in October. They always had a program in October, and I spoke there. I think 8 years in a row. I have a plaque on my wall I'm looking at right now. George Washington University Jackie Robinson project that they presented to me a few years ago. which was a great honor.
Yeah, and of course Richard Zamoff and his twin brother Barry have, and believe me, you cannot tell them apart. I still, to this day, cannot tell this. The three of us grew up in the same apartment building in the Bronx, and they were the only Dodgers fans besides their mother, who was in the probably within a mile or two. Yeah, yeah.
Been on our program.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy, and I hate to see this thing. Hate to see this thing die.
I hate to see it.
It's not an expensive program at all.
No, they have enough funding for it. They don't need any money from the university. They have funding for it, and there's no reason for it to be eliminated. I think it's very disturbing.
Yeah, one year they had Frank Robinson speak, and another year, what's his name, who wrote the classic book about the Brooklyn Dodgers, was
Roger Kahn.
Roger Kahn, thank you. Yes, yeah. And it was a wonderful, wonderful program, and they had they had to hold it in a fairly large auditorium for the number of people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Many of
I was on the program with many.
I'm just wondering, David and Ronnie, David, with your knowledge of Washington, Howard University Hospital is built on the site of Griffith Stadium. And as a matter of fact, the last time that I saw Sharon Robinson, she was speaking. We had a symposium down there, the legacy of Griffith Stadium. Now, obviously, Jackie didn't play there, but the fact is that Howard University was built on the site of Griffith Stadium and is in a tremendous African American population. I'm just curious.
And I believe Sharon went to university.
Yeah, possibly Howard University would pick up the pieces from that.
You would think. I'm sure that Richard has probably. I can't say I'm sure, but I would hope that he would think about that too. Yeah, in fact, Sharon was at the very first Jackie Robinson Project celebration that I went to, so she was there, and I met her and got a chance to talk with her a bit. It's just such a simple thing. The idea of just knocking. I mean, it's not like that knocking a building down to put up a new building. There's nothing, it's very sad.
There's no reason for it to be eliminated.
Right, none whatsoever.
What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, I'm agreeing. I'm hoping that it will. And when you mentioned, David, and Ronnie, Sharon Robinson, I think I told this story before. I was at a meeting up at Major League Baseball headquarters one year, quite a few years ago, and Sharon walked in and sat next to me, and I said, Sharon, introduced myself. I said, I don't even have to have you introduce yourself because I know who you are. I was amazed how much she looked like Jackie.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
When I met her the first time, I was like, I saw her walking towards me, and it was like, oh my God, there's Jackie. It was she looked so much like her dad.
Right. She had the full face and the gray hair, and I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
Did everybody see 42, the movie?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think Chadwick Boseman looked like Jackie Robinson?
A little bit.
Because I thought there was a resemblance there that when Jackie. This is of course when Jackie Robinson came up to the majors, not the way he looked when he had the white hair.
Right. Sure.
Well,
but the actor who played Jackie Robinson in the original Jackie Robinson story,
Jackie Robinson
looked a lot like Jackie Robinson
because of the situation in those days. He had to give a whole thing at the end of how he was American, blah blah blah, to counteract Paul Robeson.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
but
right.
I thought 42, which I saw a number of times. I thought it was very, very well done. Most baseball movies.
It was very well done.
Most baseball movies about real life players or whatever are pretty bad.
Yes,
I thought this was an exception.
Rachel had a lot to do with it too, because she put her stamp approval on it.
Yeah, she's remarkable.
She's remarkable.
Just a footnote about, you mentioned Paul Robeson. The biggest mistake that the Negro press made, the African American press made in those days, was to appoint Robeson the head of that committee to try to integrate baseball because of Robeson's background. whether he did anything or not, he was labeled as a communist. And who would want to pay any attention to a communist in those days? So it was a terrible mistake, even though he was a well-known opera singer and he even played baseball. Was a catcher on the baseball team at Princeton, I believe he went to.
No, he went to Rutgers. Rutgers, David.
Sorry.
Rutgers, please.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, George.
Our arch rival was Princeton, but yeah,
he was a top-notch football player.
Yeah, he was an All-American football player as well as being an opera singer, class valedictorian. I mean, he was tremendous. But
and I saw that picture of him in his catcher's outfit. It was a rare shot. It surprised me to see. I knew he played football, but it was a definite mistake to bring him in on that group.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as a matter of fact, to show you what kind of mistake it was, Rutgers for many years would not even recognize Paul Robeson for all his contributions because of the fact of the communist, stigma that had been attached to him. Sure. And they finally, came to their senses and say, hey, he's probably the most famous Rutgers graduate in history. We have to recognize him for his fact that he was such a well-known, international opera star as well as his athletic background.
I think he played some early pro football way back when the pro football was first really getting started back in the early 20s.
Right.
I remember he was in the first version of Showboat.
Yeah, he sang Old Man River.
Old Man River, and
right.
He was in a few other movies back then.
Okay.
Before he was blackballed.
We talked about the Latin American connection in baseball, and I would be remiss because I have two Washington folks, if not where you live, where you grew up rooting for, if we didn't talk about the Cuban connection and Washington, the Senators and Calvin Griffith, they were very, very instrumental in bringing in Cuban players. So let's start with you, George. Talk about the Cuban connect with the Washington Senators, and then we'll go to David.
Yeah, well, there was a tremendous Cuban connection, and it really started. Clark Griffith, he became very close with Joe Cambria, and Joe was known as Papa Joe down in Cuba, and certainly signed numerous Cuban ball players as well as American players. He signed my dad and Early Wynn and Eddie Yost, Mickey Vernon, that kind of thing. But Joe Cambria was legendary, and as David, will talk about, he was responsible for bringing a tremendous amount of Cuban players into Washington, and it really began with Clark Griffith, and then later, when Clark had passed away, Calvin Griffith took over the ball club, but there was a tremendous Cuban connection. And also, while we're talking about it, I just wanted to mention, Ronnie, you might not know, but I happened to do some research this morning, and I didn't believe what I was reading. The Brooklyn Dodgers trained in Havana in 1947. Jackie Robinson's first year.
They did.
I did not realize that at all until I read it this morning. So I just wanted to pass it along while we're talking about.
No,
Cuba.
that's true. It's true. Branch Rickey didn't want to, because of the racial problems in Florida, he wanted them to train in Cuba.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, I was really stunned to learn it. And David, if you want to touch base a little bit about later, during the war and that kind of thing, the Cubans were a tremendous part of the Washington ball club.
Yes, they were. At one point, I think there was something like 4 or 5 of them on the team. There was an interesting anecdote in the middle of, I believe, it was in the 44 season. The War Management Board had changed its regulations. The Cubans would come up each year under a special visa that allowed them to stay for the baseball season, and then they had to go back to Cuba. In 44, and it's strange why this was happening, because the war was beginning to turn. The Americans and the Allies were really had the Germans up against the wall. But they changed the rules so that the players actually had to apply for U.S. citizenship or go back to Cuba. That their visa was being restricted. Sounds like something that's happening lately. But the Cubans on the team, they decided, well, we're going back to Cuba. They didn't want to serve in the Army, U.S. Army.
Who did?
Yeah, well, during the war, a lot of people did.
No, during the war,
this is the Second World War you're talking about.
Right, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So they did not. They could not stay in baseball. So Griffith went to one of his buddies, General Lewis B. Hershey, who was head of the Selective Service System, and tried to get some kind of a dispensation. But the 4 or 5 of them actually started back. A couple of them made it back to Havana before the rule was changed once again to allow them to continue to play for the rest of the season. But it for a few weeks there, it really hampered the team because the players were gone, and they did come back. In fact, one fellow actually was trying to come back like 3 times and couldn't make it past Miami because of restrictions on travel on trains. Planes were erratic in their, the scheduling, and he finally made it back. But it was a very strange interlude in the season. Mm-hmm. But one of the other reasons that he liked the Cubans was because he didn't have to pay them very much. You know, that what they were making was a lot more than they'd make playing in Cuba. So that was a part of the attraction. Although there were some good ball players.
Yeah, I first came.
Oliva was from Cuba.
Yeah, I first became aware when I started collecting the baseball cards in Washington in 50-51. They had 3 starting Cuban pitchers. They had Conrado Marrero, they had Julio Moreno, and Sandy Consuegra, who later went to the White Sox and had a big year for them in 1954. And then later on, a few years later after they all went. They had
Camilo
Pascual and Pedro Ramos. Now Camilo's
Tony Oliva.
Yeah, well, they had Willie Miranda, Mike Fornielis. Right. They had a lot of guys that they wound up trading. But Camilo Pascual, I'll give you an example of what that team was like. His first 4 seasons, from 54 to 57, he was 28-66. And then he wound up finishing with a record of 174 and 170. To overcome to get a winning record after overcoming a start like that was absolutely amazing. I thought he was extremely underrated.
Pascual, Alan, as you know, probably the finest curveball in the history of baseball. I mean, he was a tremendous curveball pitcher.
Yeah, a brother named Carlos had a cup of coffee in the late 40s. Mm-hmm. But those are the guys I remember. I remember the pitchers, because the little baseball cards. I remember all the Cuban pitchers that they had.
Right.
Yeah. Who keeps Minnie Minoso out of the Hall of Fame? I don't
think he gets enough publicity. I don't think there's anybody in particular that does that. But it's just that he flies. Currently, he flies so far under the radar to the point where the idea that Baines is in and Minoso is not in, I find very, very disturbing. And every time somebody puts a picture up of Minoso or mentions him in a Facebook post, I put down as a disgrace that he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Now, he was, as much as I love Roberto Clemente, Minnie Minoso was the first African Cuban superstar in the major leagues. He was he became a regular 4 years before before Clemente came up.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at his numbers, it's like, in reference, it's like 12th all the time. He used to get hit by pitchers all the time, play anywhere, hustled all the time, and, he was just tremendous.
Tremendous.
It's
a player coming from any country that assimilates into another country and has to play ball at the same time. I
have his autobiography. Just Call Me Minnie. I think I saw the copy is autographed, and he underwent the whole thing that plus the language barrier that the African American players, and he never griped about anything. He came from nothing also. And he never griped, and he became after he retired, he'd make these occasional appearances to get the oldest player of the year of all time thing, but he became an ambassador for the White Sox for years and years and years.
Yes.
And everybody who came in contact with him loved him.
Absolutely. It's a travesty.
Yeah, it really bothers me a lot that he's not in.
Me too.
Well, it bothers all of us that Gil is not in as well.
And Gil is not in either.
And Minnie was up when they put all the Negro League players in 2006. And I asked at the convention in Pittsburgh, I asked Larry Lester, who's one of the authorities on the Negro Leagues, I said, why didn't they put Minnie Minoso in? He said his Negro League career wasn't long enough. It's only 2 or 3 years. That's why even though he was on the ballot for them back in that election, they never put him in because his Negro League career was short. By this time.
I will throw one more name in there, and that is Buck O'Neill.
Another one, exactly.
No, he should be in because
absolutely.
When they were running the Ken Burns thing, he was the only talking head I could tolerate.
Absolutely. I met him a few times. He was wonderful.
Yeah, he's a tremendous ambassador for baseball. Buck O'Neill was great.
Tremendous. That's a travesty.
I think in Buck O'Neill's case, I mean, they talk about Minoso not playing enough in the Negro Leagues. Buck O'Neill, I don't even think played in the major leagues. He
never
did
in
the Negro Leagues. And yet, some of those great Negro League players,
he was a coach, but he never played.
Charleston and Josh and Cool Papa Bell and those guys. I mean, they made it into the Hall of Fame, and I certainly think, I agree with you guys completely about, Minnie and Gil Hodges and Buck O'Neill. I would certainly hope they would all be in.
When they had that, they put in a bunch in 2006. The two biggest ones that were left out were Minnie Minoso and Buck O'Neill, and a lot of people were very, very upset by that.
Yes.
And there's a book that a writer named Joe Poznansky came out with a number of years ago. He spent a year with Buck O'Neill. I highly recommend it. And then Buck O'Neill wrote his own memoir called I Was Right on Time. And he never, got very, very upset publicly anyway that he was too old to get a shot in the major leagues.
Yeah.
He was, as Ronnie just mentioned, he was a coach. He was not only a coach, he was the first major league black man, African American, to coach in the big leagues, and that was with the Cubs in '62.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
I might want to mention one other thing is I feel very badly to hear that Frank Robinson is so very, very sick.
Yeah.
And he's very close to being passed away. It's so sad. He was the first African American manager in baseball, and a great ball player.
I met him once accidentally.
Yeah.
It's after a postseason game up at Yankee Stadium in either 1977 or '78. The game was over, and I'm waiting for the D train, to go home. And I turn around, and Frank Robinson is standing right in back of me. So I asked him under my breath, I says, "Was a future Hall of Famer like you doing riding the subway?" And he put his finger next to his lips and said, "Don't let anybody know you know who I am." And he said it was the easiest. The hotel where they were staying was at the 7th and 53rd, was a D train stop. So that's why he was taking the D train back there.
Yeah, it was pretty ironic that the first.
It was very ironic. I couldn't believe it. I did a double.
The manager for Robinson, both named Robinson.
Yeah, and that song, Willie, Mickey, and Duke, one robbery going out, another coming in.
Yeah.
And another thing I remember, I was watching a game, early season Met game when Frank Robinson was managing the Expos. And it's a night game in late April or early May. It's freezing out there. I'm looking in the dugout. They're showing him. I said, "Frank," I said, "you're a Hall of Famer. You're one of the greatest ball players ever." I said, "What?" I said, "You're 70 or whatever he was at the time. What do you need this for?" But apparently he was one of those people that they had to take the uniform off.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I also remember him as a Giant manager, and he still had that spirit, and he was quite a guy. If it weren't for him coming up with Clemente, Aaron, and Mays, which was basically the National League starting all-star team all those years.
And Banks also, they throw Banks in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about outfielders, which he was one. He got short shrift. If you look at some of his numbers, MVP in
both leagues.
In both leagues, played with Vada Pinson, whose son is on our Facebook.
Yes.
Thing. Vada Jr.
Yes.
Or I can't think of his name, but
it's Vada the third, because the player was Vada Jr.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Boy, there's another. I know another guy, something like that. George Case the third.
George Case.
Now make sure you get the third in there, Ralph.
And your dad was a junior too. So
he was a junior. Yes.
There is a parallel. Oh, okay. Hey, guys, this was a terrific show. It was
fun.
Natural, free-flowing, and had very little of me, which is always a plus when you're sitting around talking to five experts and me. So, George, would you take us on out, clear up anything that hasn't been said?
Yeah, I sure will, Ralph. This is enjoyable for me talking about, Jackie and spring training and baseball, and the fact is that we're getting close to pitchers and catchers reporting. So hot stove sessions are coming to an end in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about baseball season. So I just wanted to mention one other thing, too. While we mention spring training, if anybody's interested in seeing World War II era spring training, you can take a look at our DVD, which is Ballfield to Battlefield and Back from JFK, from FDR to JFK. And it was color home movie footage my dad took and Mickey Vernon. And a lot of it is spring training. So, we're talking about spring training, and today you look at it and you see the wonderful stadiums and what the players are going through. But back then it was pretty rustic. And I'd also mentioned, and Ronnie talked about Havana. I didn't realize that the Dodgers had trained in Havana. So it wasn't just Florida and Arizona, but the ball clubs have trained in other locations. And the fact is, spring training was something that the ball players always look forward to, getting their kinks out from the winter. And we're getting close to that time, and pitchers and catchers will be reporting. So we're looking forward to another baseball season, and we're looking forward
George,
to another session.
How can people get a hold of that DVD?
Yeah, you can order it directly from our website. Our website is www.timelessbaseball.com. And the DVD is available. It's ordering through the website, and we have a tremendous amount of interest in it, color footage, and it's all behind the scenes. So it's what people are looking for. If you're looking for, behind the scenes, what is the life of a ball player, this is what the DVD is. It's no game action. It's really the train ride, spring training, dugout, clubhouse, the old ballparks. The one Fenway is the only one still being used today. So it is a look back at baseball history, and I'm very happy to have done it in honor of my dad's memory.
Wow.
That's great.
Beautiful close, George.
Well, we'll see everybody, and thanks very much for listening to us guys talk about baseball, because it's something that we really love. So we'll see you all later. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Adios,
Goodbye.
everybody. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.